Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Inspire Health podcast. And we continue on with our series, Life, Death, and Beyond, Exploring Our Greater Reality.
And we're speaking to a rocket scientist today.
I know, pretty cool. We haven't had a rocket scientist on the show yet. So today we have Shehnaz Soni. And Shehnaz is an aerospace engineer, quantum healer, transformational coach, author, and spiritual alchemist. And Shehnaz has worked as a rocket scientist for both Boeing and NASA. Her most recent work at NASA includes the Artemis project, which will finally bridge mankind with a long-term presence on the moon and ultimately on Mars.
We'll have to talk about that.
Yeah, that'll have to come up at some point here. Maybe in the future, in the next episode on creating New Earth, somewhere else. And Shehnaz is the author of the soon-to-be released Quantum Being, part memoir and part guide for humanity. This book will bridge science and spirituality to help the reader realize the truth of their magnificence as human beings on the journey to manifest their own miracles. Shehnaz, what an honor to have you on the show today.
Thank you, guys. I'm honored myself just for you guys to reach out to me. And I'm excited about having our conversation because I'm very impressed with you, Dr. Jason, with your background. And my God, I want to get your book, by the way, because when I was listening to one of your podcasts, I'm like, I need to buy this book. And Tia, we share the same heritage. So I'm so excited for whatever quantum collapse we create here. I'm excited for that.
Awesome.
I love it. This is a conversation I really enjoy having. I remember when the world of quantum physics started to open up, I literally felt like my mind was being blown so wide open. And I remember like even looking around after going through certain information, whether it was like Dr. Amit Goswami talking about stuff, or whether it was even, Dr. Emoto's work with water and just some of the stuff that was really blowing the perspective that I had. I'd be looking around just thinking like, does anybody else like realize how fucking crazy this is? Like how much this is changing everything. And not everybody necessarily shared that excitement with me, but through the podcast, we've now been able to actually connect with lots of other people that do. And it becomes such a really fascinating world to be immersed in. And I felt, what a great way to have you on here to share this perspective, because part of this series is around exploring our greater reality. I think this is such an amazing template to be able to do that. And when we talk about life and death, I mean, your personal journey, you've literally had, in some ways, like the death of an old life and a rebirth of something much more magnificent. And I think even in the conversations we've had with guests that have had near-death experiences and whatnot, that keeps coming back because it's how did that death inform our life now? And so I think you're going to be a wonderful person to be able to share some light on that from both personal experience and from just all of your background that you're aware of. So thanks so much for joining us.
Yes, I'm excited.
So I was thinking maybe where we can start, I was reading in your book and you said, when we show up for each other as quantum beings, we magnify our power to create miracles. I'm wondering if you can share a little bit about your journey in actually showing up as a quantum being and what that really means.
Yeah, so for me, like I was very, it was interesting for me because from the time I remember, I think it was very young actually. I remember I started noticing that how I'm captive in my body. Like I'm wearing an Iron Man outfit and I was very young. I think I don't even remember, it was under 7 years old. And it was almost like this realization, you are kind of enclosed in something and you're looking at everything and you almost feel a little bit scared about the fact that this is the reality that you are in. It's almost like a genie is in the bottle and the genie wants to be out of the bottle, right? So I was very aware of my spirit kind of being it was almost like an enslavement feeling. But because of that feeling that I felt so soon, I started looking at everything in a way that, okay, I know that I'm captive here and this is my surrounding, but I never accepted anything for what it was. And that's the main reason I have come as far as I've come in my life, is because to me, I was aware that there's more to life than meets the eye. And that has been my driver for me to kind of keep moving forward. So I have changed my reality many times. And I say that, because in an extreme fashion, and it's mainly because I knew when I didn't like something that I don't like it. I also knew that, yes, I'm captured, especially when you're a young girl patriarchal culture where everybody tells you that you're just a girl, you're not supposed to think, you're not supposed to breathe. I mean, you're breathing because you're supposed to stay alive, but you're not supposed to do anything that you truly want to. And I was born not just in any Muslim Orthodox culture. I was born in so Muslim has a Shia and a Sunni, two different sects. And there is a Bora, which is another one. It's like almost like an equivalent of Jehovah's Witness in Christianity. So it's much more stricter, more conservative. Can you imagine that? And they also have stricter rules. And then we have someone like Pope that we are supposed to, follow. So the point was that whenever I would ask questions about religion, because I always questioned everything, I was told that you cannot handle the answer and you're not ready for the answer. So I never was able to get any answer. So for me, I was this thirsty girl who knew that things are just not right and I need to do something about it. So I think that kind of started my quest for understanding reality, consciousness, quantum being. And so, yeah, that's how I started. And it's an ongoing journey.
I love it, Shehnaz. When you talk about a quantum being, what does that mean, I guess, and how does someone know when they've actually stepped into that? What's sort of how does that show up in the world when you start to really step into that quantum beingness?
Okay, so I'll explain it in a very simple way. So quantum actually is a Latin word, a Greek word, I guess, and it's basically quanta of light. So the whole thing about quantum and being is like a being in the flow, right? So the whole thing is that every single thing, you have to take the premise that everything at the fundamental level is made of atom and it's an electron moving to and fro at all times. That's just the world we live in. So when you take that as a fundamental, and then when you say that quantum physics is actually the one that supersedes the classical physics, so those are fundamental points that you have to accept before you can go and take the journey with me into this rabbit hole. So the quantum being actually means that, like, when you're in the flow. So like all the people who break the Guinness Book of World Record, the reason they do that is because they are in that zone, they are in that flow, they're in that bliss. They are completely one with everything around them. It's like when you look at the bird that's flying up in the sky, it feels like it's so rhythmic, right? There's just no resistance. There's no push and pull. It's almost like you're dancing with the music. So quantum being is actually someone who pretty much shows up in a life in a way that it becomes an easy life. In a sense, not necessarily that life is going to be easy because we are here to play Hunger Game, but it's more like you are easy with life. You see my point? Like you are willing to go with the flow in a way that you are not creating resistance. Everybody else may be, and you just accept it and say, you know what? It is part of my, everything is coming to surface because, our subconscious runs the show, right? Our conscious is a very small, tiny tip of the iceberg. It's the subconscious that runs the show. So there are so many things that shows up in our life that we don't even think that we would like to have it, but it's part of the story that we're here to uncover.
No, that's beautiful.
Mm-hmm. When you were saying go with the flow, I'd like to break that down a little bit too, because I love that. And I know what you're getting at with that. What I'd love to kind of for people to be even sort of discern with that a little bit is when is going with the flow when you are connected to your internal flow versus when are you kind of going with the flow, which can be more of almost like a state of passivity that you're not even conscious of what's going on, but you're just going along with what's being told or what you're being sort of, because sometimes I hear people say that and I'm like, that's a different flow. that's almost not really a flow. That's not your own flow. How do you know the difference between those things?
Right. So let me tell you one thing. Go with the flow is same as the binary world, okay? Because the world is binary. It's either a bit 0 or 1. And that, like when you look at the matrix screen showing 0 and 1, it's truly the way the world shows up, which is why I say that, yes, there's a possibility we live in a simulation. So go with the flow to me means that you're constantly saying yes to something. And when you're saying yes to something, you're saying no to something else. Would you agree with that? So that means you're constantly deciding which bit pattern you want to create, 0 or 1, right? So that could mean that, you decide today what you're going to do. That's your 0 and 1. Similarly, that can get expanded to whom you're going to see, 0 or 1. So the feeling comes in your heart, right? So like when you're on the phone with someone that you like to talk to, and if you're feeling amazing, or if you're feeling exactly the way you want to feel, then you keep on going in that saying yes, 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 and you keep on going, that's your choice you're making and you're going in that direction. However, there are times you're on the phone with someone that you would love to just say, you know what, I gotta go, but you're not able to break free. And you see how you start feeling in your body, you contract, your muscle starts contracting. You may even miss your other deadlines because you are not able to say that, can you please, I'm done with you, because you are not wanting to mess, like you want to be nice to them. Those feelings are your gauge. So to me, it's very simple. You're the only one who can feel yourself, right? Nobody can, no matter how much you guys are in love with each other, you can't tell what the other person is feeling inside out and what type of processing they're running, because it's all of their story that's coming to surface when they're interacting with the outside world.
Mm-hmm. That's great. I think it's so important because it's like sometimes when people are tuning in, I want them to pay attention to overlaps. Like, what are different messages that come through from different people from different walks of life that kind of come back to certain key messages? And this idea of constantly coming back and checking in with yourself, because there's so many things I feel like we just naturally do on autopilot. We've been sort of trained to do things on autopilot. So when you're talking about making choices, it's a conscious choice. And where does that decision come from? Ultimately, it's going to come from running it back through yourself, checking in to see how that makes you feel, and then are you in alignment, are you not in alignment? And I think from that place, if we live from that place, that's what really where the magic starts to really happen.
Exactly. And one of the most important ingredient, do you know which one that is for this discernment that you have to continuously do? That is self-awareness. Without it, you're going to be just like anybody else, right? And that's why, that's the difference between zombie and someone who's self-aware, right? To me, I know I'm using the word zombie just to kind of make a point, because a lot of people are living in that state because partly they have created an infrastructure in a way that it has become an autopilot life. And they're so overwhelmed with their life that they're reactive, right? So they're not able to even be proactive because they have like pile of thing going on where they cannot react because they can barely manage what they have. And to me, I think it's time that we break that pattern, because where we want to be headed, we have to become self-aware, we have to be self-responsible, and we have to make the right choice that makes our heart feel really, really aligned with it.
Shehnaz, why don't you think that's been a popular thing? And this might be a rhetorical question, but I want you to address it for people. Why don't you think self-awareness and knowing thyself and self-reflection, contemplation has been a popular movement in school systems and how we evaluate our lives at all?
I'll give an example. So when I was learning how to ride a bicycle at a pretty adult age, because I never learned anything right growing up in Karachi. So one of the things that somebody told me when I was given, like, don't be scared, just get on a bike and don't worry about what you're doing. Just look in the front, right? And it actually helped me, because just by looking at the front of the road, I was able to ride the bicycle and it worked. But the problem is, it's the same. I'm using that as an analogy, right? When you really live your life through the external world, right? When you constantly live the life on how you are appearing to be, like whether you have right amount of friends, whether you have a right amount of relationship, right amount of kids, pets, what type of life you are selling as a perception, you get so hung up on that you don't check in with yourself. Like if I'm constantly worried about driving and looking at my view, but not exactly how I'm feeling while I'm sitting in a car, whether I'm tired because my feet is hurting now, whether I've driven for too long, if I'm not checking in and I'm just taken by what I'm looking at, I'm basically not in balance. So the reason people are not doing the work is because they are very much distracted by the illusion. Because everybody is selling the perception, because that's what we have been trained to do. And we have to do it to some extent. I'm not saying we don't have to, because we have to we have to show up a certain way in the world so that we can interact with other human beings without crossing any boundaries. And that's why we have system in place. But the problem occurs when people are sabotaging their needs internally at the expense of selling the perception.
Beautiful.
You talked about, in your book, you talked about the Mobius strip.
I should also mention briefly here that I know in as you were reading Shehnaz's bio, you had mentioned that your book hasn't come out yet, but I know it has because I've ordered it and it's going to arrive next week, right? Is it
Oh,
released yet?
yes, yes. I need to update my bio. Yeah, the book is out.
Yes,
And
okay.
so, yes, it's available on Amazon. And I would request you guys, please, when you do read it, please give me an honest feedback on Amazon. I cannot even believe I'm learning about Amazon, that how they have their own agenda, of course. And right now, so many people said that they can't even input my review of the book. So there is some sort of situation going on there. I don't even know what that is. So the books that can open people's mind so that we can all know that we are in a Truman Show is now going to be encouraged. And this book of mine is obviously, hitting on all those points.
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely seen that come up. And it's also why, for anybody watching this, when you do purchase a book, as best as you can, try and leave reviews and stuff, because all those things help with the algorithms to try and get it out. When you watch things like this, the best way to share the content is to like, subscribe, share it. It really is word of mouth through people that are enjoying this type of content and wanting to share it. So,
because there's definitely algorithms in place that are inhibiting the sharing of information that is vitally important for all of us to recognize at this time, so we can really take our rightful place as the creative beings that we are.
Exactly. That's why we're going to have to create our own tribe and communities. Have you guys watched the movie Atlas Shrugged?
which one?
Atlas Shrugged. So Atlas Shrugged is a pretty interesting movie. They have like 3 parts on Prime Amazon. And
I have the book, I think, right? This is a space.
Yeah. And if you have a book, the book is always better than the movie. So if you guys know about it, but you know the John Holt character, right? So I am very much interested in basically, either following him wherever he is. I'm all for it. Is that we all have to come together and create the community where we are no longer dependent on companies like Amazon as our only livelihood, because right now in a publishing world, that's the only way things can go forward for everybody. So whenever you have a single point failure, even in a software, we always have redundancy, and this is not good.
That's great.
I love tying in that kind of perspective on it too, because it does. I mean, part of like, you're going to see things very much, and systems work like that. You get a glitch in one place and it's like you're kind of stuck. It's like that's the rate limiting step is right there.
And this is why even with Jason's Nature Care Solutions book, we didn't want it to be published. We actually wanted to have complete control over the content as we deemed would be needed and necessary to share, in all honesty. So we bypassed all of it. And it's interesting because it really then becomes this community oriented space that these things can then flourish and be shared and reach out to more and more people. And we'll talk more about this.
I would love, yes, I think that offline, I would like to get to know what that process is, because I have no problem availing that process for this book. And I also am writing another book, which is even more deeper than this one. So for me, I'm no longer going to follow this platform where it's all bureaucracy and red tape and full-fledged, it is just like a New York bestseller, right? It's just like not the place where I want to go. I want to meet the real people who wants to do the real work and who's ready to embrace the new life that we are all wanting to create and live.
It's such a fascinating time right now, because we really are in this big transitional period of kind of pioneering a new way of trying to do things, while still, where can you untether from the system that's really kind of keeping things in a certain way and not letting it change? Where can you start to untether while you create something new without, with still being able to get stuff? It's like we're still on YouTube, we're still on Facebook, because those platforms are the main platforms that let us get the message out. Would I like to see more platforms continually develop, and we support them when they do come up, but it's a transitional period of what's ultimately going to be in the highest good to share your information and get it out, and as we create new things.
And as we oftentimes think that these platforms are free, but they're not. We're actually through supporting these platforms and using these platforms, we're actually giving away our freedom, giving away our
100%.
Giving away our data.
I always say that when anything is free, then you are the product. Think about it. Facebook, same way. So whenever it looks like that it's free, that's actually worse. That's why I always say that, like, even with anything and everything, have you noticed in life, if you want to do anything where something comes free, then it takes something that you are not even willing to give, because it's better that you know what the boundary is than you have to sell your soul.
And I think with that is just being really conscious of what you're participating in, doing it from a conscious place so that you know what you're doing, why you're doing it. And to me, it's like, then we're just all clear. It's like, I know exactly what we're doing and why we're doing it. And it's like, I'm okay with that at this point in time. And when something else moves me to move into another direction, then we will move that, right? And that will start to come into place. Very much like what happened with our kids with school, it was like we knew what we didn't want them to do. We knew what we did. And then that gradually just started to open up and create the perfect place for them to be nurtured in the way that we wanted.
That's exactly what, and that's what I would recommend. Even earlier when you were mentioning that, how do we navigate our lives with these type of duality that we're living in? And to some extent, like, I work for NASA, and a lot of people who support Sasha Stone, they think NASA is all, selling an illusion, selling a big time illusion. And it's very true. They are actually. But at the end of the day, we are all surrounded by human beings who are making it happen. There are, just like in any species, there's human beings that are doing what we would like to follow. There are human beings that are doing that we don't want to follow. So at the end of the day, we have to keep on converging everybody to the song that we are creating. And that means you have to go, you have to make the most of everything. Because if we say, okay, I'm just going to divorce all of you guys, then, we are still supposed to live with human beings, So how else are we going to do this? We have to take them along in our journey and see who wants to come along.
It's almost like we're positive infiltrators.
Exactly. You got it.
Yeah.
That'll be a new book or course. Shehnaz, one of the things that you talked about in your book that I think would be fun to discuss a little bit was you were talking about when we're in this human craft and we're sort of taking flight into this magical life, that we go through 3 separate journeys. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about those 3 separate journeys, the soul recognition, the soul awakening, and the soul activation. Just sort of briefly what that means.
Yes. So soul recognition, I kind of touched upon it when I said that when I realized that I was a genie in the bottle, right? It's like, if people realize that there's more to the story than what they are, like if they know that they're kind of a little bit confined in this body so that they can learn what they are here to learn or experience what they're here to experience, then that actually is one of the most fundamental thing you have to know, that it's a spirit in this body. It's not the other way around, because we have been so, and that actually connects to what, Tia, you were asking, is that why people are so lost, or why are they not turning their self-awareness on, is because they just think that whatever they see is it. See, the reality that we actually see is like less than 10% of what truly is, because of our limited spectrum, right? Our electromagnetic field spectrum that human can actually see and hear is very, very tiny compared to the spectrum that we have, which actually says a lot about how limited not as a species, but as a physical world we are. So we give way too much credence to physical world, and that is the soul recognition part of it. The soul awakening kind of goes into more of the aspect that there are fundamental laws at play, because we are all here in this playground, and if you know that there are laws that are going to happen, whether you if anybody comes and says, well, I don't believe in quantum physics, then that's okay. But the thing is, that doesn't change what it is, right? You don't have to believe in it, but at the end of the day, you're affected by it. So to me, why wouldn't it behoove you to understand? So hopefully you can ride along with it and hopefully make the most of it. Because I don't want you to be surprised every time when you look in the mirror and you see the same shit that you have already gone through for years and years, because you are not willing to embrace the fact that you're supposed to learn, and then you can move on to the next mirror. If you're not going to do that, then it's going to keep showing up the same way. So soul awakening kind of gets into all the stuff that I learned, right? Because I've gone to many mystery schools. I've taught Kabbalah class to all the Christians and Jews. So I have this incredible experience doing all these different things. And it was my way of sharing the soul awakening part, where everything that I learned as a fundamental concepts that will help you navigate life better. And then in the last one is soul activation, right? So in that one is where I'm actually giving you kind of keys to the kingdom so that you can really show up for yourself the best and the maximum way you can, because it's a journey ongoing, right? You're as long as you're here, you're evolving. And to me, if you're not evolving, then you might as well die. So that's the main reason I like to have this type of conversation.
Yeah, it's interesting because we alluded to Guy Needler, who started this particular series just before we started to record today. And in one of his books that I was reading, when he was channeling the source, or he was having a conversation with the source, he actually got the information that, if we're not evolving after a certain point to really fulfill our soul's mission, then we'll be out. So it's not like, there's a God out there who says you're out, you're not making the grades, but it's just essentially, before we stepped into this physical body, we kind of looked and created a life plan for what we were going to achieve in this lifetime. And that involves evolving on a soul level. So when we've ceased to do that, or we're no longer fulfilling that mission, if you will, then that will be one of our exits that we ultimately on a soul level choose to go out and then start again in the next lifetime.
Exactly. And it's funny you mentioned the word life plan, because yesterday my mom called me because, according to our Islam, right? I mean, we follow lunar calendar. So it was my birthday yesterday. So my mom was giving me happy birthday. And then I asked exactly because I'm born on a day when Muhammad Mustafa went on a journey to understand the life plan for humanity for all the Muslims. So it was interesting. The life plan was the word that my brother used yesterday, because I always, like my family all follows Islam very well. And of course, I was raised as a good Muslim girl, and I still believe in the fundamental principle and all the goodness that it ingrained in me as a human being. Because to me, all the religions are fundamentally wanting you to be a good human being. It's just sometimes when, other agenda kicks in, then it starts contaminating the original intent. So yeah, it's interesting you mentioned life plan, and I was like, yes, life plan is the key.
Shehnaz, how did a Muslim girl start teaching Jews and Christians about Kabbalah?
Oh, you should have, and that was actually in the 2013 August when I was actually my first class. I even wrote down on my cover page that here's a Muslim teaching Christian a Jewish way, right? If you think about it, Kabbalah is always connected to Jewish way. So it was hilarious because, I think it was because, so in the year 2010, January, when I decided actively to pursue, like basically it was kind of one of those things where I synchronously, I ran into a magazine. It was Natural Awakening magazine. And I opened it up because I'm always intrigued about new things in life. And I saw Metaphysics 101. So that just completely got me thinking, because, I have taught physics as a coach because, I had to learn it. And so I said, what is metaphysics? So I went on a Google and typed metaphysics for the first time. And that was January 2010, right? And I started reading about it, and it said beyond physics. And I'm like, I am all about beyond, right? I mean, just take me wherever. That's why I work on going to Moon and Mars, because I love going beyond Earth. So for me, that was just like a trigger. And I took so I went to a mystery school locally here. I did Metaphysics 101, 201, 301, 401, tarot, astrology. I just did everything they could teach. Then I said, I want to learn more. Where do I go? So I was asking them, right? And they said, well, you have to learn Kabbalah now, because that's where rubber meets the road. So then I said, okay, who can teach me? So that the woman who used to teach was 80 years old, and she said she's not going to teach anymore. So I actually learned under her for 6 months, and then I taught the class from there on, because I said, well, if I can't find a teacher, then I'll become one here.
You are so cool.
Shehnaz, I love that you even got into metaphysics, and that's actually, we have an upcoming course that's going to be probably launched in the next few months or so. That's going to be actually a 30-day metaphysics detox. It's this whole idea of literally like, I mean, we get filled up with so much of what's not us, and there's on these dimensions that we don't even realize that we're participating in. And so part of this is to how do we really like clear out a lot of what we aren't, and in a way of like sort of literally frequencies that are not supportive for us, and then fill back up with more of who we truly are so that we can operate from that place. You know, you were talking about, you said that there's more to life than meets the eye, and you were talking about we get so focused on what we see through the five senses. You know, this is such an important concept because, and this is what I love about where quantum physics, I feel like really blows this up, but it's like we base our reality on this tiny little spectrum bandwidth that we only are perceivable through, literally through the five senses, which is a very narrow bandwidth within the whole physical reality. And then the physical reality is a very small bandwidth within the absolute reality. But we are in resonance and out of resonance with all of this different stuff, but we don't even realize it. So if we can start to tap into that, that's where the biggest determinants, I would say the hidden determinants to transformation really exist. And so this kind of gets into when, even in your book, you talk about energy, frequency, and vibration. How does that change everything when we start to put that lens on as far as how we live and create in our lives? When we start to put that lens of looking in the world at energy, frequency, vibration.
Exactly. So one thing I want to tell everybody who's listening is that quantum physics and Kabbalah go hand in hand. And I actually have a course, 12-week course, which I would love to teach people, where I show how science and spirituality converges, like Kabbalah with quantum physics. So going back to your question, it's interesting because when you have the understanding like that you just explained yourself, is like, you know, so three of us are sitting here, like I'm sitting in Huntsville, Alabama. You guys are sitting in California. We're talking on planet Earth. We are on Earth. Basically, we are on a space and time. If somebody's looking, let's say that there is a extremely intelligent species out there that's looking at us as like in their, you know, just for the sake of observation, because it's kind of entertaining for them to look at us right now, let's say. So now they're looking at us. We are on Earth, and Earth is supposedly, you know, I mean, I have to say that. I know it sounds sad for an aerospace engineer to say that, but, you know, a lot of people question whether we are living on a dome or whether truly there is moon and Mars and all this, or whether it's all enclosed in some sort of dome. And you know what? The sky has no limit, which means that there's a lot of different possibilities because of where we are in our technological evolution, right? There is a possibility we are all playing this computer game that we don't even know because it feels so real, right? So going back to wherever we are, right? If you keep on expanding your perspective, right? So you can say we are on Earth, you can say Earth is moving around the sun, you can say that, the entire Milky Way galaxy, right? You can keep on expanding. It's like zoom in, zoom out. So when you do this zoom in and zoom out, and let's say that while we are interacting with each other, and if something happens where something happens that is not unexpected in your mind, even though nothing is unexpected, but you know what I'm saying, something happens that kind of turns you off, like, or takes you off your game, you will look at it from a different perspective, because you are going to see that in a big scheme of life, in the next 10 years, what happened just right now, does it really matter? Does it really mess up my life for the rest of my life? If not, then let's not get so wrapped up about it, right? So I think that is the mindset that it opens up when you start realizing, and you also realize that you're actually kind of immortal, because from a spirit sense, you're immortal. You know, your physical body dies, your spirit doesn't.
I have a question for you, Shehnaz. So as Jason was talking about, we understand so little, and you alluded to this as well earlier, saying about 10%. And then you, of this reality, nonetheless, the greater reality. We hear sometimes, we've spoken of this as well, as far as what we're in resonance with. How do we best then facilitate a growth and an evolution from within in order to actually come into resonance with an optimal way of actually seeing, observing, sensing, not just our current reality, but our greater reality? Because people oftentimes, they'll even watch certain episodes within our series and say, well, that resonated with me, but that didn't. Whereas I'm looking at it and thinking, but like he's offering so much, like it's so vast what he's offering. How can you not be in resonance with it? And I realize and I recognize now that it's an inside job. But I wonder how you would see it, even from the quantum physics point of view.
Right. So I think the one of the most important thing is that we all have to do our own house cleaning, right? First. It's almost like embracing my gray, right? That's a pretty big step for me. So it's kind of like because we all have so much things that we are hiding with ourselves because a lot of time we may not know what is our truth, partly because and it's not like it's anybody's fault. It's because we all have been distracted to a very large extent, right? So I think that the first step is always like all the things that you feel that you are not happy about, you got to do something about it, no matter what it is. Even if it is something as petty as that you don't have enough money, because at the end of the day, there's a reason, because everything is energy, right? So to me, even if your only goal in life is to become a richest person, then don't judge it. See what you can do with about it, right? So the goal is that whatever you're, and that's why any type of class that I teach, I always ask everybody that what gets you get up, get out of the bed, like what makes you so excited about living life every day that just makes you want to like, oh my god, I can't wait to start my day. And you won't even believe it, half the time people struggle answering that question, and it surprises me because I'm only asking what is exciting you. I'm not saying what's exciting your husband or your wife or your children. And a lot of time people answer me that it excites me that my children are doing well. And I said, no, 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 I don't want you to worry about anybody but you. And they don't have any clue. And to me, people live through other people. And that's actually one of the things that I want to highlight, that don't live through anybody, even if the people you love, especially when you love the people, because now you're imposing your expectation on them if you're going to live through them, right? I mean, that's a lot of unbalanced energy being said. So I think the first step is people need to at least know what excites them, like what wants them to live. And then if that excitement hasn't made way into their life, then they need to create a tiny portal. Like, I mean, in my case, I created a tiny portal, and I'll share with you guys is that I knew that I couldn't leave NASA because, I do get paid really well. I have 4 boys, and I am single mother, and I have all this responsibility. One of my son is a special child. So I knew that I wanted to do all these amazing things, but I also knew that I can't just say, okay, goodbye, NASA, and hello. I can't do that. I have to do it with responsibility. I ended up meeting Sasha when he came to Nashville. We spent 2 hours in the car. And then when he asked me to do Lazarus Initiative, I started doing that. And it became a portal for me to have these experiences like we are having now. And this is going to ultimately multiply because we live in a fractal universe, right? So when you take a tiny step in the direction of what you like, then you keep on feeding it and it keeps on multiplying. So that's my suggestion for everyone, is that first find out what excites you, what makes you want to get up every day, and then do something about it, even if it's as tiny as meeting one person who may change your life.
That's so neat. I
Yeah.
just had an image of, we had gone to Costa Rica a few years ago, and I remember just walking along the beach, and as the waves rushed onto the sand, every time that would happen, there was like this tree that would form with these stems and branches that would go in different directions on the pattern that would form on the sand. And I thought, wow, that's kind of how our attention and focus is, isn't it? It's like the more we kind of look and become aware of what gets us excited about life, or what we want to work towards, or an inspiration and insight that comes up that gets us really excited and stoked about life. It's like the more we look at that and the more we bring attention to that, it just creates these possibilities that we can then pursue from just becoming aware and just infusing that space and that idea with attention and focus.
Exactly. That is exactly, the waves is a very good way of looking at quantum physics, because it's like it comes and goes, just like the world we live in. Everything, the electron is in and out, 0 and 1.
Shehnaz, there was a quote that you mentioned that I really love in your book, and it said, "Our greatest fear should not be of failure, but of succeeding at things in life that don't really matter." That was a quote by Francis Chan. I really love that because I actually feel like Tay and I were having a conversation a little while ago around this, around just really what matters, and how much of our energy is actually put on things that don't matter. And I'm wondering how you've even sort of started to work with that, because living in this reality, there's certain things that have to get done in a certain way, yet we often put 95% of our time usually in those things, and maybe 5%, if we're lucky, in the things that really do matter to us. How do you balance those two aspects of it in regard to that? Because I feel like that's so important, because otherwise you are waking up in the morning and not knowing what excites you and why are you doing it, and it burns you out. This is why people become I think why relationships break up and why people are not passionate about anything after a while, and why we get so pulled into distraction, because we're not really living. How do you kind of balance those parts of what sort of needs to be done as being a part of this physical reality that we're still in, and at the same point really starting to put our attention into what matters?
Right. So first, you always have to, like, in the pendulum, right? When the pendulum goes one extreme, then it needs to be brought to the other extreme. So for me, the fact that I lived a life, and in the first 4 chapters, you're going to find out all the mess I went through in my life. So that mess actually gave me the perspective of all the things where I was not doing anything for myself. Like I was not, even though it looked like that I was standing up, but I wasn't standing up in a way that I could feel less reactive and more proactive, right? So that's the thing about now that I came to this state in my life, that I've learned enough, I've experienced enough, where I know how to create a balance. So for me, it's very interesting now at this point in my life. Like if I even interact with the new energies, which means you go to a party and then there's a conversation with someone that you feel like maybe there's a room for a new friendship, and it feels that way, and then afterwards you follow up, and then the way they respond and the way things happen, I pick up information more than what is provided. So that to me is where the self-awareness kicks in, and it helps me create a balance. In my previous Shehnaz, I would, because I'm very A personality, I'm very proactive, so I would go out of my way to ensure that I would meet this person that I think we click. Now I notice the way they're responding, the way they're acting, what they're saying and what they're not saying. And I actually read all of that. And then I actually say that, you know what, as a bird's flying in the sky, you kind of say that if it's not going in a rhythm where two people are reciprocating equally or in a balance, then that means we are not supposed to interact, because it's not my cup of tea. You see my point? It becomes, it's like you're reading the message that is not even said, but you're also reading the message that's said, because people are telling you what they want from you and what they don't. Majority of the time we run into unbalanced situation because we're imposing our perception of them on them.
Yeah, and to really be able to do that means you have to go into the situations without an attachment to the outcome. Otherwise, you will try to control it, and then you're really not in this flow. So, this, to be able to do that, you've got to be okay with it. This is where that whole feeling of sort of faith and trust and putting it outside of what you think needs to be done, because we just know that little piece of the puzzle, and there's such a bigger process at play.
Right. And then in some cases, you may want to just do what you think that you should do and then see where it goes, and you're going to learn. So
Yeah.
it depends on how much time you want to spend on learning that and coming to that same conclusion. Do I want to do it right away with the wisdom I've acquired, or do I want to waste a month of friendship and then come to the same conclusion? You see, now that's a choice that people can make all day long, because we all are making choice that how long this one lesson needs to last. So
Yeah, and I know what it came for me with relationship stuff, because this is part of what people will see is you'll see the same pattern playing out in your life over and over again with just different participants. I know
characters
different
will pop in.
characters. Yeah, I know. I went through that with, personally for me, it was a lot of it was relationships, like my love relationships, same pattern over and over and over again, and to the point where you really kind of, well, for me, I really kind of hit like my knees and was just like, what am I missing? And then it was literally like an aha flash in, is sort of where the pattern even originated from and what was going on. And then it was actually brought to my awareness to a point that I was able to actually then let it go. And then shortly after that, then I ended up meeting Taya. This is over 10 years ago. So it really can happen quickly when these aha moments pop in, or when we really do shift and we're not in resonance with that scenario anymore. So, but a lot of that was letting go of what I thought it needed to look like.
Exactly, exactly. I think, and that is the thing, that the more you do these things, and you've already seen when you were attached where it took you, right? You already have taken the journey. So now you have become like smart. You're like, okay, I am not going there. Thank you very much. I got the picture. And the other thing I tell people is that, whenever you are trying to meet someone and you have a scheduled date, and even like, let's say 3 of us are supposed to meet, and for whatever reason, if it doesn't happen, always know that it's actually, there's a good reason behind it that you're not seeing it.
Mm-hmm.
Always accept that, because there's always a reason that we don't see it. So I think it just makes you way more accepting of what things are.
And then looking for, rather than getting caught up on what went wrong, your perception, then the lens you're wearing is always looking for, universe has got my back.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a nicer feeling than it's out to get me, or things don't work my way. Because then you open up naturally to new possibilities.
Exactly, because they say rejection is redirection.
I love that.
Shehnaz, you were talking before about fractals, and I'm wondering if we can just explain that a little more. When we talk about being in a fractal universe or a holographic universe, can you share what that means a little bit for the layperson that's not too familiar with that concept, and how that impacts the way that we show up on life, just understanding that concept?
So universe is fractal is one of the law that I explain in my book in chapter 5. And the reason that is related to chaos theory. So the whole thing is that, and there has been a lot of study done on animals to kind of see that how, like they do their, evolution, like all the process in place in the world, in the universe, is created based on fractal principles. So if you look at the tree, the way that the tree spreads out in branches, you look at your heart, you look at your inner tissues and everything has this pattern that it follows based off of the Fibonacci sequence, right? That pattern is just embedded in everything around us, whether you look at the tree, whether you look at the flower, whether you look at your human body, whether you look at any kind of progression on multiplication of any kind of species. So fractal is just part of the story. And it's interesting, when I was actually reading about how it was discovered and how it was availed, it was first availed actually because one of the Boeing engineer, I used to work for Boeing, so I am very familiar with that. In Seattle, Washington, he actually wanted to create the best effect because it was purely for marketing. They were trying to create a best effect to show the plane flying with the mountain in the background. And in the process, he learned about chaos theory, and he was a software engineer. So he input the chaos theory parameters, which is z equal to z squared plus c. And he ended up creating this incredible graphical representation of the plane flying the mountain, which looks so real that then he was contacted by the producers, Hollywood producers, and then they start using it in the movie, which is why the movie ended up availing the whole CGI. And that's why we feel so real when we are watching any kind of world-ending movie. It looks so fun, right? Because it's all CGI. So the thing is that the fractal is the nature of the universe. And when you understand how it evolves, it makes sense. So like, even with these relationships that we're talking about, right? The one that works out or doesn't work out, you can see that if you would have gone on this particular branch of the tree, that is basically called bifurcation. So bifurcation pretty much means that you follow whom do you say yes to and whom do you say no to. It's a fork in the road, right? So wherever you go, that starts multiplying into its own fractal reality. And so the thing about the fractal is it does work on two principles. One is bifurcation, which I just mentioned, which means wherever you say yes to, it's going to keep feeding that energy, right? Energy is flowing in that direction, and then it's going to create another fractal reality for you. The second is hologram. Hologram means that the part of a whole contains the same amount of information as the whole, which is why our DNA works. That's why our DNA can, multiply and replicate and self-organize and self-sustain and self-heal. All of that is because of the fact that our body has a fractal principle. It works on fractal principles. So you can take it as above, so below. So you can talk about our body and how our organs work, or you can talk about the life and the path that you take and where you end up going creates your new reality. So you created this reality with Tia. If you would have not met her, you would have had a whole different life right now, right? So that is an example of how fractal world is. And when people can understand that, they can leverage that understanding for the better evolution for themselves and others.
We had a conversation with one of our favorite guests, R.J. Spina. You'd probably find his work really fascinating too. And he's sort of he's a metaphysics teacher and everything too. He's really tapped in. And he was talking about that a little bit too. And he said this is the importance of where we really need to get to a place where we start to eliminate doubt. Because every time we have doubt, we literally create another fractal. And with that, we actually are drawing off aspects of our life force, little bits all the time. And so the more that we doubt, we keep creating these fractals, and it actually draws us farther away from the path that we're really wanting to be here to create and to manifest. I wonder what your thoughts are.
100%. 100% you're right. And actually it goes back to what Tia was asking me earlier, where she was saying that why does people don't do self-awareness, or why do they not do what they need to do or love to do? Is because of what you just said. It's because when you get so distracted, because, you know, just like you can create with the fractal understanding, you can also create a whole bunch of mess with the fractal understanding. I mean, whenever you watch a movie where in the beginning somebody does something wrong, and then in order to hide that wrong, they lie. And then in order to hide that lie, they do more wrong. That's a fractal example of messing up your life. I mean, so you're right, 100% is that it's so important that, you know, and you know, the interesting thing is, and Walter Russell does a very good job in explaining that, but the one thing that everybody needs to understand that, you know, all the religion and everything, the 10 commandments, everything tells you to be a good person, right? Like to not kill people or don't do anything bad. And, you know, the universe actually does work on the principle of intention. So when you do everything with a good mindset or with a good intention, it does multiply ultimately and reward in a very beautiful way. When you do something wrong, even if you are the only one who knows, even nobody saw you doing the murder, let's say, and you think you can hide it, but at the end of the day, you have created a ripple in your timeline that's going to haunt you for the rest of your life. Whether other people know or not, it doesn't really matter. You truly messed it up for yourself. So that actually should make people follow whatever is good rather than not, rather than even worrying about being in the hell or heaven, because, you know, I mean, we are technically creating that right here on earth.
So that begs the question, then I can almost hear people saying, so why do we have, you know, the criminal, the handful of criminals going off right now and running the show and trying to control the whole of humanity on a global level in nefarious ways? Why is it that, you know, they've successfully, as we can see it at this point, navigated humanity on a particular path and have been doing it for a long time, generation after generation?
It may be more like service to self rather than service to others.
It's because supply versus demand, right? If you keep on feeding into that, like if everybody keeps on feeding into everything that they don't like, then we are basically saying it's okay to keep doing it. So I think that is why, you know, that is why this book Quantum Being is out, because we got to start owning the power that we have, right? I mean, my goodness gracious, I think that to me, this whole day thing needs to stop, because I actually get, like, you know, last year I taught a class on quantum human, and some of my students would send me all these videos about how dark this world is and how messed up this world is. And my God, what am I going to do? And I'm like, you know what? If you're going to constantly just listen to that and only do that all day long, then what are you really doing? I mean, you're either part of the problem or either part of the solution. Which part do you want to be on? And yeah, there's a lot of mess here created. But at the end of the day, if we all decide that we want to be part of the solution, then we need to start doing whatever we need to do. So I'll give you an example. In my case, all my kids were going to school at one point and they were all wearing masks and none of them liked it. I didn't like it. I knew exactly the pros and cons of masks. I went and did my speech all over the school here. And within 2 months, we were able to take the mask off the schools. The point is, whatever it is, whether you agree with me or not, I'm not saying you need to agree with me, but what I'm saying is whatever you believe in, do something about it. Don't just sit and talk about it and feel sorry for yourself. So I think that's the thing, that these people only have the power because, you know, we were sleeping. None of us were using our self-awareness. We were all distracted by our life drama. We were actually also distracted by whatever drama they wanted to feed us through televisions or other methods. So technically, they enslaved us because we were willing to be enslaved.
Yeah,
So there's a cause and effect.
I totally agree with that. And to me, it's like, and regardless of what you want to look at, whatever you don't really like, whatever comes up, to me, it's the contrast that's asking me, then what do I want to do? What do I like? What am I going to do now to create more of that world and less of this? And then that is going to come through you in your own personal instructions on how you want to show up then again in the world as more of you, right? So we were just listening to something with Matthias a little while ago, and he was talking about the dark and the role of darkness, whatever that might be, and why it's so essential in order for exactly what I think we are here now is to move us, this catalyst to move us more into that. And I agree. I think we've been asleep in so many ways, very much like that quote that I just read a little while ago around how, so much of it is spending time in what really doesn't matter. It's to start to shake up a little bit to get us to really relook at what matters and what do we want to do to bring more of that in. So yeah, I very much love, and your book is all about empowering people to actually arrive at that place.
I actually teach holographic reality class mainly because, and I actually talk about it in my book too, so you're going to get to read that in one of the chapters later on. I had to actually build on it because when I asked one of my girlfriend to read my book in the earlier stage, one of the chapters, she said that reads like a rocket scientist. You need to dumb it down for people. And I said, well, I guess it's hard for me to do that. So I said, you know what, I'm going to build on it. So people, by the time they get to chapter 11, they're all able to handle me. So that's the strategy I've used in my book. But anyway, so holographic reality to me will also help with this challenge that we're in right now in terms of a few people running the show. Because, if everybody can understand that how powerful we are, if our imagination can truly change our lives, right? So if all of us, even just three of us, right now, we want to imagine heaven on earth. We want to interact with people like-minded people. We want to create communities. We want our children to grow and nourish by good food and good thoughts and good education, right? All of that, if you keep on multiplying with the ripple effect, right? This is how we're going to make a difference in this whole world. So holographic reality, basically, the thing about it is very interesting is that in 1983, CIA had already discovered how our human brain works, with our hippocampus and how the projection works and how we actually do feed into our experiences day to day. They already had written the paper. It was a classified paper, and I stumbled on it in 2020. The paper got released in 2017, but I stumbled on it and I loved it. I just ate it up because it was so yummy. It was 30-page paper where all these goodness in there. And I'm like, my God, I just want everybody to understand that. So of course I send it to a few people, but everybody doesn't understand it, which is why I have a class, because I can explain that in a way that no matter where you are, you can understand it. Because to me, this is the type of treasure we want to give it to the humanity, especially because a lot of people are still hung up on making sure that the science supports the evidence. They are not willing to take metaphysics and Kabbalah as the grain of salt, even though to me, spirituality always precedes science because we are more non-physical than physical.
Yeah, I totally agree. I stepped out of that too. I mean, it's not, I like science, but I mean, inevitably, if you follow science, eventually science gets debunked for new, better science. Like almost inevitably, it always will. I mean, we've seen that in health from the origin of it for the most part. So it's one of those things where let the science keep coming up as we learn to be able to assess things in more modern ways, but don't let that be your box that you're only going to stay in. Otherwise, you're always so far behind. And then what's the motivation to keep expanding upon what we know? And this is sort of the difference I find with even knowing. When you have personal experience with things, you know them to be true in a certain visceral way. And then it's nice when science can eventually prove it, but you already knew it because you've had your own personal experience with it. So to me, whenever I have my own personal experience, that I think is important and has valid for a lot of different people likely. So that's kind of important to keep sharing. And then I think that's the catalyst for keep stretching what we think is possible.
Right. And one of the things that we all need to remember is that our DNA holds memory, right? So our DNA actually is a multidimensional toroidal nanotechnology itself. And because of that, it's constantly picking up information from the morphogenetic field and is doing the dance of 0 and 1 itself. So that is why we have deja vu or all these experiences that we can't explain. So to me, all of those things are now coming to surface. But all this time, like we had all these Sufis and incredible people, like even Beethoven and all these people who were tapping into that field and doing this miraculous things that was mind-blowing for people to explain, is because they were tuning into their own power. And that is the message, is like, please hone into your power, because you are better than any rocket I've worked on.
That makes me think too. What are your thoughts then on kind of this big movement of more and more sophisticated AI, and where is the role for that versus sort of our own abilities as quantum beings and what we're stepping into? Where do you see pros, cons, the marriage of that from your perspective?
So I think that is why it's very important right now that we help human beings to understand the power that they have within them, and also what they're creating. Because, in the process of creating, if you're going to keep on creating things that is going to outdate our gifts and our credentials, then ultimately that's pretty much what we're creating, because our creation will always happen, because that's how powerful we are. But are you willing to compromise yourself in the process? Now, as far as the AI goes, for the most part, have you guys watched the movie Free Guy?
No.
Okay, that's a great movie to watch. So in that movie, they kind of show the AI as a intelligence that resides in the computer. And in the beginning, the program of the intelligence was purely simple. It was given full-fledged instruction on what to do on a daily basis, so that artificial intelligence basically does a very basic thing, like it grabs a coffee and it does its day in a certain way. But when it starts realizing that, I don't have to get this one flavor of coffee, I can change it to something else. His entire programming, and they show it in a very interesting way, because, they show like the flow chart, right? Before it was very simple, yes, no, and anybody can comprehend that. As soon as he starts completely doing whatever the hell he wants, he creates so much fractal changes in his consciousness that he becomes like an incredibly powerful entity in the computer, and everybody has a hard time controlling him, because now he's running his own show, he's on autopilot. So I look at AI as an algorithm. It's a very brilliant algorithm, and see, just like the 0 and 1 that we do with our lives, and we create our fractal reality, similarly, AI, you feed it a certain input, but ultimately it can get out of hand, and it can extrapolate, and it can go into its own world, and it can go to the extent where human may not be able to control it. There's a possibility of that, which is why I was very impressed when Isaac Asimov in 1950 or something wrote a book that predicts the future of 2035. And he was kind of expecting the future to go much faster rate, as when you see the movie iRobot, but it didn't really happen that way, because we're still in, I don't know if 2035 will look like that. It may actually. But I think what I'm saying is that yes, AI can be a concern, but the thing is that our soul is the technology that we have that provides us this layer that the AI doesn't have. The other thing is that quantum physics has already proven that it has this attribute about it that is kind of indeterministic, which means that, so electron can be 0 or 1 based on double slit experiment and based on your consciousness. However, electron can also have a third state, which means it is neither from your perspective. And that is where it gets into the point where, we have all these dimensions, like, membrane theory, where they're all kind of like on top of each other, like a slice of bread, right? So, like, I don't know if you've had experience where something gets lost in this dimension and you feel like, did it go in some other dimension? Where did it go, right? Mm-hmm. And that to me is still in the world that we live in. So I think there is that is the reason I feel like that AI will not supersede human, at least not in the next 20, 30 years. However, if we don't get our shit together, because we are not even doing what we're supposed to do as a human being. Like, we are not really owning our power. We don't even realize how amazing we are. We are still following everybody else's agenda. We're taking whatever drugs doctors gives us. We're really not doing what we're supposed to do. So if we don't do that and we stay distracted, then AI can easily take us over, because they are much more, they're much more organized and they're much more synchronized. And with us, we are way more powerful, but then we have a track record of being distracted.
Yeah, yeah, that's really interesting. You know, as reading some work by Dr. Ibrahim Karim. I'm not sure if you've heard of him, but he's done a lot of work in an area called biogeometry, which I think you'd probably be really fascinated by.
Yeah.
Different than sacred geometry, but it's essentially trying to imbue the different energy wavelengths that they found naturally in power spots on the planet, which specifically are horizontal negative green, high harmonic gold, high harmonic ultraviolet, and those three exist together in these sacred power spots that are naturally found on the planet. And through design principles and angle, he's able to reproduce those energetic qualities within, like, through architecture, like in homes, and it can actually protect against the dehydrating effects of a lot of EMF and all these different things. And they've done some pretty cool studies with cities in Europe, where they've actually really done this sort of work on areas that have had a lot of like EMF smog and stuff, and a lot of problems, and really mitigated the damage from it. He was talking about AI at one point, and sort of this idea of being able to sort of infuse that quality, which is literally this sort of this divine nature quality, sort of a spiritual quality, but he doesn't relate it specifically to any sort of God or anything. It sort of more ties it to this divinity within nature itself. And if there's you could almost try to imbue AI with that, so it has this quality inherently in it. Almost reminds me a little bit of like Rudolf Steiner's work, when he would talk about moral technology, and that consciousness has to be a certain level for any technology, and then from that place it would be designed within consciousness.
In a beneficial way.
Right. It's interesting, because it reminds me when we watched the iRobot, right? There were 3 laws, right, that was given to the robots, so that they always had to make sure that they follow within that paradigm. So it's kind of along the same line. But yeah, I would love to get the name of this person that you recommended. You can maybe put in a chat, so I'll look him up, because I'm all about helping ourselves with the positive electromagnetic field, which is why I do follow certain, Centropics is one of the machines that I'm actually using recently, because it's done by using the pulse electromagnetic field methodology, but they are doing the pulse electromagnetic molecular activation. So they're availing the technology, but they are using the patented signal, right, to kind of really upgrade the complex waveform in a way so that every single molecule in your body gets activated when you are on a mat. So to me, all of these concepts are amazing, and I'm using one and I really like it, because you have to use technology to work, heal you, because there's technology that's kind of stealing you from your original power.
Yeah, it's all a part of building resilience, I think, so that we can show up in our fullness.
Speaking of the technologies that we're surrounded by, with regards to H.A.R.P and C.E.R.N, I would love to hear your take on those technologies, and what your experiences and insights are on them, and what sort of effects you see as them having on human health, our reality, and even our weather, and what ways we can implement in order to mitigate any ill sort of effects from those technologies.
Okay, that's a great question. So yeah, I guess so. H.A.R.P actually was invented, right? I mean, a lot of these incredible technologies, especially H.A.R.P and some other technology, that were invented initially as part of a strategy for winning the war, right? Because war was always the reason for a lot of technological evolution. And I have a son who basically is doing meteorology right now, and he understands weather really well. So he's my son who just taps into the electromagnetic field of the earth, and he basically says exactly where the storm is headed and what's happening, and he just says all that. And that's why I finally had to put him in a school, because I said, nobody will listen to you unless you have the right paper to go along. I mean, that's just the world we live in, right?
Yeah.
So he's doing his thing. But to me, the technology was initially invented for a reason, to kind of like work with your opponent. But the problem is that because of what you mentioned earlier, that there's few of the people who are really using, like, it's almost like they're having fun at the expense of a whole bunch of humans who have been sleeping. HARP has been used in weather control. And not only that, actually, in California especially, I actually got a lot of data on all the things that were happening, the fires happening in California. They were using the DEW, which is directed energy weapon. And these are all these weapons. Some of them are all, they fall into classification, higher classification when you work on them. So a lot of time human beings work on these products, but they don't even know that they're doing it. Because see, you don't know the entire story. You're going to be given like a very small part of the puzzle, because it's a need to know basis, right? Mm-hmm. So in your mind, you may think that you're doing something really cool and it's going to be amazing laser and it's going to be so stunned that nobody will feel it. But you don't know that it can use, because just like gun, you can use it to defend yourself. You can use it to kill somebody for no reason, right? It's the same thing. So I do believe that we have technology like HARP that does play with the weather. I also believe that depending on the goal, right? Depending on whatever the goal is of these people who are playing with humans' life, they can use that for their advantage, right? Because like, why not? You have a tool and it's kind of entertaining for you. You're not looking at it as like what you're doing or whether you're messing up people's life or whether a lot of people are dying, because we all know that there is also a connection with the whole depopulation agenda, right? Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a mess that we are living in. But to me, this is where, because it's all boils down to people. There are people who have worked on HARP who are good people. There are people who are, now they know, they may not know at the time. So to me, this is the time that all of these people needs to just do whatever needs to be done, right? To kind of operate on their consciousness. Now, as far as the CERN goes, to me, the whole reason that they started the CERN was to understand exactly, how the human being got created during the Big Bang and what was the original constituent of the Big Bang, right? Because then it helps us understand where we come from, where we're going, and it kind of taps into the human design aspect of things, like what are we truly made of? And it could be that was the reason, but it could be that was the facade, right? Because, there's always a facade and there's always what's really happening. My thing is that just like with AI that we were talking about earlier, if we truly have the good intention with these things, we will have a good result. But when our intentions are mixed up, then we have bad results. And there are times scientists are working together that some have good intentions and some not so, right? Now, the Higgs boson and what they were talking about, what they're going to do in the next, by 2029, part of me, it concerned me, partly because Higgs boson does interact with our dense reality because of the particle itself, right? Because it is the particle that is what the reality is made of. So when you're tinkering with something like that, you are creating an unbalance between matter and antimatter. And when you start matter and antimatter does have some unbalance, which is what keeps this earth in a certain gravitational force and certain, there's a configuration that we're all in. And you don't want to annihilate that configuration by tinkering with something in the quest of understanding where we come from. You don't want to kill yourself in the process of finding out who you are. You see my point? Mm-hmm. And that concern is always going to be there, because I personally don't know who's running the show, what their intentions are, what is the ultimate goal. And to me, you're tinkering with the fundamental particle, right? You're tinkering with the fundamental particle of all of our existence. So we have to tread carefully, just like with AI, like not go so far that we have a hard time coming back around.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. And I definitely like that. Regardless, the essence of all of it is to come back that we're all individuals, and what can we all sort of step into more of ourselves in this process. We interviewed someone in a series we did before called The Illusion of Free Choice, a Return to Mastering Who We Really Are. And we were just looking at all the different ways that we've kind of, in a lot of ways, kind of lost our power or given our power away. And how do we return back to it? One of the things that we talked with her about, she's an investigative journalist that's done a lot of work in clean energy.
Gene Manning.
and she's written several books, and her and her partner at the time had actually gone and they'd spoke to people at, I think it was H.A.R.P at the time. And just
Angel, and one of the titles, the title of that book that they wrote together was Angels Don't Play This Harp.
right. And it was just interesting because they were talking about, like, the people they were talking to were like super excited about what this technology was and what they could do. And so, just really jazzed about the whole thing. Weren't in it for any kind of bad negative effects, but there was sort of no long-term thought about what maybe punching holes in the ionosphere might actually do, other than excitement for wondering what would happen with it. So what she said is it's often boys with their toys, as that she said. And she said a lot of times that's what it is. So to me, it kind of comes back to our level of consciousness and what we're doing. And most of these things can probably have all sorts of benefits or detriment depending on how they're being used. And I think with a care and a respect for each other and for the planet, then all of this stuff will be different. But part of that's going to be the process of each and every person stepping more into their quantum selves.
Exactly. That is, to me, is where, like, anybody who has any concern about humanity, where they're going, I'm like, what are you doing for it?
Start
Like, I
with you.
always ask,
Yeah.
right? And people are like, well, I can't do anything. It's too big of a problem. And I said, well, if everybody thinks that way, then you're right. Nobody will do anything.
Oh, I had that conversation a little while ago, and the response was like, well, what are us little people going to do? And I said to Tay after, I said, that's the problem.
Oh,
if
maybe
we
the ant
actually,
story.
if we actually think that we're all just little people, then we never will actually create any difference. But if we actually
use the analogy of the ant. I like that one. When we were in Mexico, we
Which
were
one again?
doing a Spanish speaking lessons. We lived in Mexico for almost a year last year, and
Yeah.
there was a story where I hadn't gone in that day, but Jay was there taking Spanish lesson at our kids' jungle school, jungle Waldorf school that they were attending at the time. One of the parents had chosen to offer once a week Spanish speaking lessons, and maybe you can go on and tell that story of the ants.
Oh,
As
like
far
when
as little people.
Oh, yeah. As far as if you get enough little people, everything will move out of the way. We were sitting there taking this class, and next thing I know, the lady beside me, this is all outside, and the lady beside me is like, oh, there's lots of ants coming. And all of a sudden, everybody kind of got up, and it was like a black wave behind us from the floor all the way up half the trees of ants all on a march. And running out of the bushes was everything you could imagine. There's like a tarantula hightailing it out of there. There was a scorpion moving out of there. Everything was moving out of the way from these tiny little ants. But because there was like literally like millions and millions of them, all just moving in a direction, and everything was moving out of its path.
Exactly.
And so they actually created this all they did, it's so cool because they knew exactly what to do. No one was freaked out. They just came and dropped salt all as a little line, and they never
Mexican
crossed over.
locals.
The gardeners there basically came and just put the salt along, and the ants never crossed over. But it was just really cool to kind of see, it doesn't matter how big or little you are, you get enough little people and things change. People move out of the way. So
Exactly. And that reminds me that you guys have watched Finding Nemo. If you haven't, then I'll give you a little, right? And in the scene where all of them are trapped in the wire, right? And then they're all like thinking that they're going to like basically be captive. And then, it says swim down, right? They swim down, and then they all swim down, and then they're able to break free from so that is what we all need to remember, is that yes, we are being trapped, we are being enslaved, but if we can all swim down together, right? So that togetherness is where the power lies. Teamwork is a dream work, right? And I think that I just hope that with this interview, and as many as you guys are doing, and as many as I am doing, and everybody else that's on the same path of helping with this, we can really all swim down together and just break away from this enslavement for good.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. I think that's probably even a really good place to start to wind down. I think we've had you here for a good hour and a half or so now.
We'd love to keep you for another hour.
This was really fun, Shehnaz. Love talking with you.
I wonder if you can, I'm just eyeing this question that we had that I would love to ask you still.
I knew you were going to ask this one.
You had mentioned that we emit light. Can you speak a little bit more about this, and also maybe even the relationship between light and time?
Yeah, so we emit light. That experiment was done in 2009, July, by Japanese scientists. That they actually kept few scientists in the room, and I go into the detail in my book. But the point is, they proved that we do emit light. That's just the way we, that's the photon is part of the, it comes out. But the thing is, the absorption of the photon and the emission of the photon is what decides your overall upkeep on how you look and how you feel. So if you think about it in that sense, I kind of take it a little further and I say we are kind of a light being, just like plant is, right? Just the plant, when it doesn't get the sun or it doesn't get the water or it doesn't have the good soil, you see how it affects its color. It doesn't even look as perked up. So we are in the exact same way because we are actually, an upgraded version of plant, right? In every which way. Plus we have consciousness to deal with. So light can heal us. That's why when the baby comes out with jaundice, right, then you put them under the light and help them heal, because light affects us and sunlight affects us, which is why I teach light body activation class, which is all about activating your pineal gland. So it can create all this incredible DMT and melatonin effect where you don't need to take melatonin tablets or any kind of DMT drugs to kind of feel the effect, because you have all the good stuff in you, right? So going back to your question, you were saying that, yes, we are definitely light being, and how it affects us is because of the biophoton, right? So biophoton is the attribute of our DNA. And we are continuously absorbing photon and emitting photon. That's just the process that we're continuously doing, which is why you noticed how you can tell by looking at the person, right? Whether they're lit up or whether they are down, because they're tired or they're up. So we can perk up like a sunflower, or we can perk down. So that is all part of a, like at the very, very nanoscale, we basically perform that function at all times. And the reason we don't feel it or see it is because, we don't see the photon, right, coming off of our DNA. We don't even see our DNA to that matter. Now, the light and time are intertwined because how we process information. So if you really think about it, when I'm saying something, and by the time you hear it in your mind, you hear it as I'm saying it, but there's a lag. And similarly, there's a lag in our processing because, okay, so I'll give you an example of watching television, right? When we watch television, we see everything as like perfectly moving together. We get so engrossed in a movie, emotional movie, that we cry for the girl, even though we know that she's acting, even though we know it's being projected through the television, and even though we know that our high resolution makes it look like it's all one, but it's a pixelated image, right? The reality that we live in is a pixelated image, but we think that it is all one and it's all there, is because of the way our human eye and our human brain processes information. So if we truly process the information as fast as it is coming, like a lot of kids with neurodegenerative disease, they actually process faster than we do, which is why they have seizure or epilepsy, or they have trouble with certain lights. And that's why light can heal them, is because they are looking at things as flickering and we are not. It's almost like, because it's a smooth transition for us, we're able to handle everything as is. So there is actually, and my God, Walter Russell goes into detail, and we can just do a whole podcast on that. It's like how we process information. It gets pretty deep in a scientific world. And these are the type of things that I can just eat it up all day long because I love it.
Very cool.
We'll have to have you back on that. I would actually love to do one around that with even neurodegenerative diseases and doing it really expanding upon that whole concept in a multidimensional way, because I think that's a really important one too,
Yes.
as I'm sure you're well aware of. So
Yeah, this will be the first of many. I'm excited for a lot more conversations. This was lots of fun and so exciting to dive into more.
Shehnaz,
Yeah.
where can people learn more about the work that you're doing and about the courses that are going on? Where can they order your book? All of that stuff.
Yeah. So basically my website is pretty much my first name, last name.com. So it's Shehnaz, Shehnaz, Soni.com. So it's easy to remember. And once you go on the website, you're going to see all the workshops, services, also all the things I do to keep my human craft well lit. It's Health is Wealth is one of my places where I talk about everything that I take, the supplements, the machine I use, because to me, we need to use that instead of all the paradigm that we've been following. So yeah, my website will pretty much help. And also they can look me up on a YouTube. I actually recently did an interview with a woman who's expert in autism. And yeah, you would love to listen to that because she has been written many books on autism. And it was fun talking to her because I love, just like you guys bring certain people in your podcast, I do the same thing because to me, I want to learn and evolve. And then might as well share with the world these type of conversation because people are hungry for this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. Shehnaz, I'll have all of that information in the show notes so you guys can all check that out. And again, when you get our book, please leave a review. It definitely does help. If this episode was beneficial, if you enjoyed it, please share it, spread it around, and let's get these messages out. I think they're super important, and this is all part of the, to me, this is all part of the education that we really all need to be embodying right now. I think this is what's going to turn the corner in a lot of ways. So, Shehnaz, thank you so much for your time. That was wonderful.
Thank you, Jason. Yes, lovely to meet you. Take care.